There we go. I think you're getting it clear now. This is Crazy John. I'm here on OSH Radio with David Shumaker. You've been with me before, Dave. We do work together in the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And tell us a little bit about background about yourself, just in case nobody's watched your other interview I've done with you.
Well, I would certainly hope that some of them have. Yeah, thanks, John. Good to be here.
I think you just went blank there for a second, your picture.
Oh,
there you are. You're back.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just fading already. But anyway, yeah, so I'm Director of Applied Innovation for the U.S. Transhumanist Party. I also have started an Arizona state transhumanist party as well. That's pretty early on in getting some things going here. I've always been a transhumanist, or not transhumanist, but technologist, futurist, explorer. More recently a transhumanist, and even more recent than that, a cryonicist. So I'm playing to the future and maybe hedging my bet somewhere along the way. So applied innovation for directorship with the U.S. Transhumanist Party was pretty natural. I come from a technology background. I'm very interested in, from a futurist point of view, what's the far future look like in technology, but I'm more interested in what can we do with it today and what's developing that we can do in the very near future. And those are the things that are exciting. I have a Facebook page that I put up that's dedicated to this, that is called Applied Innovation. And as I see things that I think are interesting or want to discuss, I put them up there and try to engage people as far as that's concerned. One of the things I've noticed from that is that many people don't realize what exciting times we live in here in 2020. And I'm not talking COVID, and I'm not talking elections, at least not yet. What I'm talking about is the exponential rate of increase in technological development and how that's being applied in innovations. And many things that people still think of as science fiction are either becoming science fact or are in fact good, credible science that are being developed by business people for use in everyday life. And some of those range from self-driving cars. Here in Arizona, where I live, we've got self-driving cars on the road. You see them all the time. And at first it was a novelty, and now people take it for granted. And that's what happens with technology.
I have a car that when I take my hands off the wheel, it drives itself for a while, but then it yells at me. Says, you gotta put your hands back on the wheel, and then if I don't put them back on, then it threatens me. You don't put it back off, we're going to turn off. And I'm like, that's not a good option, because what if I'm in the middle of traffic and you decide to turn off? But it is interesting that the technology that we have today that they can do. And, you reminded me of something you said about COVID, but I think COVID is an interesting time. I read an interesting article that they had on ZNet, which it said this has kind of pushed us to do things that we've been able to do for a long time. Viral meetings. I've had a number of meetings that have people involved from other countries and other states. And if we were actually meeting in person, you wouldn't be able to do that. And even one day, one of my jobs, I get out and I work with customers and stuff. And there's some days when you're just like, oh. I thought to myself, let's see, a 3-year trip to Mars might not be that bad.
Depends who you go with.
Limited number of people to deal with, it might not be bad, but you'd realize you still would be communicating with people virtually, just like we do now. And in all reality, I think this COVID and staying at home and doing virtual meetings is preparing us actually for a lot more space travel than people even realize, because we're used to now interacting like this. And I think people are getting used to this being it's funny how it shifted from, kids are on the computer all the time, and that's not really interacting, to now this really is interacting. And, when people are going to be on the moon and they're going to be on Mars, people are going to stay in touch like this. And it's not going to be as much of a shock as I think it would have been at one time. A couple of years ago, the first Explore Mars I worked at, because of me having gone up to space in the MiG-29, one of the people that designs spaceships was asking me, one of the scientists, what did you do to get through it while you were in the flight? Didn't it bother you? Didn't it scare you? Weren't you claustrophobic? And I'm like, well, yeah, I was claustrophobic. But in my mind, I said in there, I have a certain amount of time. I just have to get through that time and I'll be back on Earth. And I said, that's what kept those fears at hand. Although when you're gone for 3 years, though, that's a long time. Because that's like one of the shortest trips to Mars would be 3 years out and back. But yet, if you're used to communicating with people like this, you don't have to be as lonely as you would have thought you did anymore. I mean, there's going to be delay, but this technology in itself, and people getting used to using this technology, like even the Sunday salons, I guess he used to have those himself, like he used to have those somewhere else and actually meet with people, I believe.
Right, yeah.
But now there's people from all over the world getting on those and watching it. And, I think it has really made the world a smaller place, but people didn't realize that. I'm sorry, I was just on a tangent, though.
No, that's okay. But I think it sets great expectations from what we're doing, like you say, with COVID. People working from home, maybe if they'd never worked from home before, there was an adjustment. But the IT infrastructure people, if they work for a sizable business, already had some capacity to do that. They had to scramble to make greater capacity available, but they didn't have to reinvent things. So that's important. And so being able to roll that out essentially came down to, budget, manpower, but not needing to invent something new to make it happen. And I think those kind of things will go to that as you're talking about going to the moon and going to Mars, because when you don't have to reinvent, that's where you save the time. And then you come up with a great idea, and I go, wow, that's wonderful, John. That was a great technological solution. But you know what? I think if you tweak this, I can do this with it. And that really drives innovation. And it goes back to those exponential rates. You don't have to start at the very beginning each time. That's what keeps linear rates in motion. When you can build on top of what's been built before and you share that, then we're into the type of things that we are now. And to that point, I managed data centers for a bit. So in the data center, on my computer, I would have a dashboard display that would show me what was going on in my data center. I could look at fan speeds, I could look at airflow, I could look at the amount of electricity, the performance, humidity, temperature, all of those things. What's being developed now is really exciting. Add a set of augmented reality glasses and walk into your data center and look at your servers and see that information about each one as you're looking at them. That's part of this step. The next step after that might even be full virtualization, further down the road, admittedly, where I don't even need to go into the data center physically. I can sit here working from home and look around and see my data center and know exactly what I'm looking at as if I was there. Even working from home now in a data center environment, the only thing that I have to require is if a hard reset needs to happen someplace. I may have to get somebody on site to go do that. But we even have tools for doing those kind of things.
You might have an additional robot that's controlled remotely that could do that.
Exactly right.
Well, one of the things you talk about building on things, like right now we're doing all this virtual stuff, and now we have increasing data that your smartwatch can get on your health.
Yes.
I mean, so basically your watch could be taking information on your health. You could be in a virtual meeting with the doctor. Your watch can send the information to your doctor, and your doctor can get real-time information on your health without you actually having to be there.
Yeah, that's right. And as a cryonicist, this is really important to me, because in cryonics, one of the things that I and others are looking at is that type of technology to take care of something like this. So what I'm showing you, obviously you can't read it, but this is a medic alert tag. So if something were to happen to me, there are instructions of who to call and the initial steps for a first responder for the start of biostasis. Now, imagine transferring something like that etched medallion, that information into my smartwatch. I have a smartwatch that takes my pulse every so often, does other things, connects to a smart app where I compare weight. Well, let's not talk about that right now. and blood pressure and things that I want to keep track of, just to keep on track of what I'm doing.
That's
But if it
about.
can take my pulse at regular intervals, it can also send an alert signal to somebody
Exactly.
if that
And
pulse is out of
you
range.
don't need one of those other necklaces that do the alert. Your watch can do it.
Exactly.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I was going to kid about the weight though, but I noticed looking at you. No. During this
It's the
COVID,
screen.
I went up 10 pounds during this COVID. Now, mind you,
Right.
10 pounds to me isn't probably what 10 pounds to you is, though. But I used to be doing the stairs when I was at the office every day, 17 flights. And so now I'm not at the office. So I started doing those virtual races. I walk them. I don't run them because the metal in my leg and the fake hip, I can't run them. But I started walking them, and it just pushes me to do the extra exercise. You know what I mean? But that's another thing. My mileage is kept through my phone and my watch, and goes to the race place, and they know how much mileage I have, and if I completed what I was supposed to complete. And of course, some people joke that people could still cheat by attaching it to their dog, but
We've made jokes about that because both Susan, my partner, and I have watched that counts our steps and so forth. And she's the competitive one among us, and she competes with and a couple of other challenge groups for steps. So she's had days where she didn't get a lot of steps, and we do have a dog. So that discussion has come up.
You secretly put it on the dog when she's not home, don't you? I myself really like the idea of nanotechnology, and
yeah.
I mean, now that I already have injuries, I'm going to have an implant put in for a tooth, and although I don't feel that bad about it, my next birthday I'll be 60, and I've only had 2 teeth pulled. I have a couple caps, but now I'm going to have one that's going to have to be, pulled and the stud put in and a fake one put on. But I mean, if we remember when we were younger, most everybody by our age had false teeth.
Yeah.
So, but the nanotechnology would be like that could repair you and stuff. That would be phenomenal. I mean,
sure.
to the far reaches of sci-fi. But even if it was just in your system enough to help regulate your diabetes or to help monitor for cancer cells, or
that's how it'll start.
That would be great in itself.
Wearing my watch, as good as the watch is, I've read stories that say depending upon your skin type, skin thickness, skin coloring, the sensors can be swayed by some of that. But if you have nanobots, then those nanobots are in your bloodstream. They can move, they can be piloted to where they need to go. We eliminate that. One of the other things as we ramble on about subjects is brain interface. And right now, that's an evasive technology. It's one that's being developed. But to me, it seems like the real way to do that is nanobots that can span the blood-brain barrier.
Right. Well, yeah, that would be very important. Yeah. I'll tell you another concept here. Now, this just came to me in the middle of stuff, but 2 concepts. I've been watching the new Swamp Thing show on CW, and I followed Swamp Thing before. And that is where, due to science and stuff, and maybe something else, he became a mixture between plant and animal.
Mm.
And it's interesting to me because I was just thinking this in Anne Rice's one book. Anne Rice, the one that writes the Vampire Chronicles and stuff, she also does mummies. And in the mummy, the elixir he takes has something to do with photosynthesis. Because like if he goes into the dark and stays there for a long time, he just shrivels up and basically goes comatose, but doesn't die. But when he gets the sun, he comes back and he heals and everything. So it's almost like he's experienced another plant animal hybrid type thing that needs photosynthesis to be alive. And maybe science, our minds always think about robots and technology as that, but even the fact maybe if maybe there's some other way that we can do things that we're thinking of doing too. Maybe, like I said, like the hybrid between plant and animal, where we could grow our flesh back like plants can grow back, or trees or something. You know, that technology itself is different than nanite technology, but yet it still would take science to being able to do it. It might be another route to do it that's more related to nature than we think, although we're kind of doing something nature doesn't do. But I mean, there might be other avenues that we're not even realizing sometimes. And, you know,
Well, maybe it's only because nature hasn't tried it.
Yeah, there you go. Or they have, and it has gone, might have
or
gone
it didn't work,
away, right?
and it was abandoned.
We don't know, but that's another interesting way to think. You know, like they talk about, you know, genetically splicing different things together, too, and that could be something. You know, like certain animals can heal better than we can. I mean, we have built-in redundancy built into our systems. We have two halves of the brains that aren't fully connected because one could get damaged, and you still have the other. We have two eyes because if one's damaged, you still have another. You know, we have two arms, two legs. You know, we have redundancy built into us, and really it's built into us for the fact that if you get injured, you're not out for the count. You
right.
know what I mean?
Fault tolerance in the world that I come from.
And even the fact that our heart now has 4 chambers, I mean, you can deal with one chamber not being fully functional and get by. Maybe not ideally, but still get by. So, you know, there is a redundancy that you know, genetics built into us to begin with. But I'm off on a little tangent, but I'm just saying there might be some aspects to science that we're not always thinking about. And I do love the idea of nanotechnology, though. I would like little buggers going through my system fixing me. I mean, you know, I've had 5 eye operations. It would be nice for them to repair my eyes like normal eyes, or go in and eat up the metal in my legs and replace it with real bones, and it'd be a real functional hip instead of a fake hip. You know, that would be great if that technology could exist. Or go in and clean out, even if, here's another idea. What about even, you know, one of the first things we talked about was diabetes monitoring and all that stuff. Maybe the nanites, one of the first things they could do too is go through your blood vessels and clean out blockages and stuff and keep them open. You know, because, you know, some people genetically just get more buildup than other people. I mean, you can have people, you've heard the stories of my grandfather ate lard until he was 98 years old, and he had no heart problems, you know, and that's genetic though.
You're right, and that's where gene editing could be really exciting too. If we can isolate what makes people impervious to those things, then is there a way to give that to other people that weren't naturally born with it?
Like, look at you. You look great for 85. You
know? And I don't feel a day over 90.
Just kidding. But yeah, so nanotechnology is another thing I'm interested in for health and stuff. And like you said, even communicating in the tie-in between brain and computer and getting information and stuff. Like you were saying about virtually going in. Why would you even have to virtually go in? Maybe the data would be in your brain right away. Yeah, you would know the facts. You'd say, oh, sort of like you going, hey, Google, what's today's weather? She might say it. But, and you just say it in your head to yourself and the information will come up. Yes, she's saying it. Hey, Google, be quiet.
Oh, yeah. But that does bring me back to, you know, what can we do with these kind of things today? That's, like I said, that's my orientation, or maybe here in the next couple of years. And since we were talking about COVID, I'll bring that back in that COVID has allowed, I think, more of those conversations to come up. And of course, we're in a political season as well, and both you and I are involved in political policy and political party.
Yeah, we said we were going to talk about that.
Right. So I'm going to get it there.
That's our feed in. Yeah, there we go.
But the point is that while there are no transhumanist candidates running for office in Arizona, that has not kept me from going out, especially during this election season, and essentially interviewing candidates about where they stand on science and technology. And COVID has made that easier, not harder. In the past, I would have to go to a town hall meeting or some type of an open meeting, try to get on the docket to talk. These have been pretty much all virtual meetings that might have X number of people involved, but if you can craft a really good question they'll call on you and you get an opportunity to talk and chat with this person that's either an incumbent, wants to be an incumbent, and and the things that we talk about as far as science and technology in the near term, we can pose to these people and see if they've given that any thought. Sometimes you can tell they haven't, and other times I'm encouraged in the fact that they have, and you can actually engage in a conversation. And you've got other people listening, hopefully, that are thinking, well, gee, maybe there's something to this. So COVID has opened up some doors in policy and in politics to me.
Well, if anything, too, with it being virtual, I don't see, they should be able to answer better, actually. They should have their iPad down below where you can't see it when you're talking to them, and they should have somebody feeding them some data. And right now, it should be easier than ever for somebody to be feeding them data. So, I think they should be able to. Now, talking about that, now the Transhumanist Party, Charlie Cam, he's right now the presidential. What states is he on? What states has he gotten on? I'm not totally aware of that.
I don't know whether we were successful at getting him on in Colorado. I know that was a very real possibility. And I know that there are write-in campaigns in a number of states that allow it. But
well, I think that's
honestly, we've got to do better than that in the future. But I think my personal thoughts on that is it's great to have a presidential candidate, but I want somebody that's going to sit on city and council commissions and school districts and school boards. There's an adage that says all politics is local, and I really think that's where it needs to start.
Well, I discussed that with some of our candidates previously about that idea. After this is done, to reach out in the next 4 years, we should be reaching to the local governments and the other things that are for people to get to know us. Sort of like Howie did from the Green Party, how he's gone and worked for in other, gone for other elections and other positions. And I know Howie's out there, the Green Party's out there on a lot of ballots, and the Libertarians on a lot of ballots. It is a pity, though, we've discussed this here at home and stuff about the fact that, our country really comes down to being two parties, and you really kind of limit your choices. And it's a pity. One of those gentlemen I think we had on one of the salons mentioned that basically, I don't know, it was in Spain or somewhere. He said basically we have as many parties as there are people running. Everybody. And
that was Jose Cadero.
It. And it's a pity we're not more like that in this country. I mean, there are people out there, but the funding doesn't go to them, and sometimes you have to worry about are you voting? If you vote for the third party, are you giving the campaign to the person you don't want to win? Let's put it this way. Are you giving the campaign totally to your worst evil because you're not giving it to your lesser evil? Let's put it that way. How's that?
That's a valid concern. Here in Arizona, the way that I want to approach that with my little corner of transhumanist politics here is not to necessarily register the Transhumanist Party as a party here in Arizona. There's currently 4 parties that are registered in Arizona. Obviously, Republicans and Democrats, but also the Greens and also Libertarians. All 4 of them are registered and fall under the more preferential rules of how it is that you can get somebody, on a ballot. Now, they have to maintain that by gaining so many votes. That's very cumbersome. So the way that I look at doing this here is more of an endorsement or a certification or something of that nature. So if I've got somebody in one of the major political parties that's interested in something that's very near and dear to transhumanism, whether it be health, whether it be whatever it might be, then let's look at endorsing that person and then really making a difference in what they're doing, and not to get trapped into becoming a subset of any one particular party. As I mentioned, there's 4 parties that are officially recognized here. I would hope that we would be able to spread that out, not party parity, if you will, but at least hopefully touching on all 4 parties, but really focusing on the candidates that take science, health, and technology seriously and take our core values seriously. And then let's go try to get them elected. And the way politics works, of course, is that if you can bring help to someone, then you're going to have their ear after they're in office. And I think that's one way that we transcend the two-party system. I think taking the two-party system on head-to-head and trying to fight it is a long fight. I'll take a tangent instead, and I think that'll work better.
Yeah, I think somebody to do that would have to have a lot of clout and money behind them, and that's the problem. The main two parties have a lot of clout and money behind them, and yeah, I don't really think it was a bad idea of Zoltan to change over to being a Republican to run when he was running. I don't think that was bad. I mean, I wish it would have gone better for him, but you know, it's weird the way the parties are, like you said. You know, it's difficult, and I don't know when it'll ever change. But it would be nice if it did. I think that's some of what Howie's trying to do with the Green Party. He's trying to be out there pushing and showing that even if he doesn't win, he can get a good amount of votes and he can make a difference. You know, I think the libertarian people that are out there right now are good also. But then again, like I said, my worry is that you're helping your worst evil win instead of your lesser evil. You know, sometimes throwing the vote.
Pardon me, I did not put my phone on mute.
Is that your wake-up call, or?
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking to John later on. I want to make sure I wake up afterwards. No.
This is my call that if it's not going well, I can get out of talking.
There you go. Yeah. I got an emergency. That's good. I like that. I just have it written on a piece of paper. I'll hold it up and she'll come over and tell me there's an emergency. You know, you just edit it out then. That's all. But no, I say I don't know. You know, there is that worry though. You want to show people that you're willing to vote for the third party and that the third party gets votes, but then I'm sorry, the way the system is, you still have to be afraid that you're at this point you're giving the vote, like I said, to your worst evil and say your lesser evil. I'm not really happy with either of the main candidates, to be honest with you. I mean, Biden's from Pennsylvania. He's from not too far where my girlfriend was from. Trump, I've had some dealings with. I've met him personally, and I've actually, back in the 80s, I even sent him a letter. You know, back in the day when you sent letters to people.
Wow, I heard about that.
I actually sent him a letter about investing in the space program. Because my idea, that's after his one, The Art of the Deal was out. Right after that book, I sent it to him.
Okay.
Hey, I thought we could play off his ego and say, you know, maybe you'd want to be the first person to have space hotels or the first person to have a Trump hotel or casino on the moon, you know? And I just thought that might appeal to his vanity, actually. But I did get a real nice letter back saying at this time we're not really looking in that direction or anything. But here we are, and I have to admit he did push the Space Force, and I'm happy about that. Like I've said in the past, though, I just wish I think the reason we're going to space is more of a military reason than a exploration and economy.
It's been that way from the beginning. I mean, back in the 19th.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was the U.S. against the USSR. I mean, that's what it came down to. And now it's the U.S. against Europe, against China, against Russia. And don't count India out of this yet either.
Exactly. And I was...
yeah, I think there's plenty to do there. But you always have to ask yourself, now, it was more of a political show in the 60s. You know, who was superior.
Right.
But that show has changed now because people are looking at the value of low Earth orbit. They're looking at the value of certain points in space that have strategic
economy. Yeah, watching things strategically.
Yes, and then the moon. Yes, there's bragging rights for the first nation state to put something there. But I think it's less the bragging rights than what does that mean? What can we do as far as raw resources are concerned? And if you're not going forward in today's economy, you're going backwards. So going to the moon is something where we need to go, in my opinion, to even just stay competitive. And then moving on to Mars. And not only that, it's not just governments that are involved in what's going on. You've got multiple now private businesses that are looking at orbit and are looking at the moon and looking on to Mars. And one of the reasons that I think Space Force, in my opinion, might have been a little premature, but I'm glad that we're moving in that direction, is because we need to be able to protect that ocean of space between us and the moon and us and Mars, which is constantly changing. Continents don't move around much, but these planetary bodies do move around constantly and need capability to handle that. Now, I want to say right up front that I don't see this as an extension of Star Wars or Star Trek or any of the other, not for a long time, if ever, because I think things will probably move differently, but I do enjoy watching that science fiction. The part that's not science fiction, though, is being able to navigate robotics in space. Today we think of those as satellites, but we'll move on past that as far as, what we can do to protect other places that are out there and be able to protect our commercial interests, much the way our Navy protects commercial interests of the United States in international waters. So now we'll have international space that will need to be protected the same way.
Well, I think people don't realize, too, the technology that will be developed as we're working more towards space. And I think also the health technology, because being able to get to monitor people's health and their bodies and keep from having the effects of space and long-term being in space on the body, they're going to have to work on maybe different technology, maybe even nanotechnology, like we said, to help maintain their health. And I think that's going to have a back effect on people on the Earth, and then people on the moon and people on Mars and so on. But I mean, like, people don't realize, a lot of times people say, well, why support space exploration? But they don't realize how many things we use today that came from space.
Absolutely.
Because they had to design things, and people don't realize that there's a lot to that. And
you could also go back to folding maps if you're against space technology, because GPS would not be here if it wasn't for GPS satellites. And that was spearheaded once again by the military, and then became a commercial entity. And we'll see that play out over and over and over. I remember quite well the 1960s and the space race. And I remember enjoying a number of things that were directly touted to, have come out of that, food for the astronauts. And
I love it. Tang.
That's it. Tang was what I was thinking.
People forget about grape tang. Grape tang has been forgotten.
Maybe there's a reason that it has.
It wasn't that bad. I liked it.
But just even in low Earth orbit, going back to the medical that you're talking about, people can't stay up there that long because human bodies in a microgravity environment don't do well. You don't have blood and lymph fluid and so forth flowing properly. So we need to find ways to do that. And there's a couple of different routes that we can go. We could create little bubbles of Earth, if you will, with artificial gravity and artificial oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, and the amount of blue light and yellow light and so forth that we need, and take that with us everywhere we go. Or we can find our way to adapt ourselves so that we can live in those environments. If you go to the moon, no atmosphere, obviously, and much, much less gravity. Atmosphere on Mars, very thin. More gravity than the moon, but still less gravity than the Earth. So how long can you stay there before you start losing muscle tissue? Exactly. So these are the things that have to happen. And maybe it'll be some compromise in between where we bring some of the things that we need and we find a way to adapt. And if you go back into the annals of human history, people leaving Africa, a nice warm region, and heading to the north in what is now Europe, had to learn to use fire effectively, had to learn how to dress appropriately and how to tan hide and to save food. And sure, it's a different level of complexity now, but we've always done these things. We put ourselves into environments that probably would have seemed hostile if no change had been done, and we found a way to make the change. And in some of those cases, we changed as a process of that.
Well, let's not also look at the vitamin D deficiency from
right.
different skin pigmentations moving to different areas where you can get less sun.
Exactly.
You know, that's a great example. You're adapted to a certain area. You move to a different area. Mind you, it's different, not as much of a change as going to Mars.
No.
But still, though,
but we can influence that now in ways that we couldn't even dream of back then.
I believe Mark Kelly, right? It is the astronaut.
He's running for the Senate here, and
right. I've actually done some stuff with his campaign for. You know, I like that. But him and his
I tell you what, just a quick aside. I'm retired Air Force, and he's running against an incumbent senator. She was appointed, not elected, and she was an Air Force fighter pilot, and he's a Navy fighter pilot. Boy, that makes a tough decision for me.
My dad was in the Navy. That's funny. My dad was in the Navy, but he worked on planes. So he was an electrical engineer. And people don't realize sometimes the Navy has had more planes than the Air Force. But that is odd. But
different purpose, different focus. But yes, you're right.
Between him and his twin brother, though, being in space for a year had made some changes to his genetics by turning switches on and off and stuff.
Exactly.
And that's kind of interesting in itself.
So there's a lot that we need to do moving forward. So as I talk to people about applying innovation, I want them to understand that this is something that humans have always done. We're going to do it because as humans, we've never been content to just stay where we're at. Some people do, but I'm talking about the aggregate of humanity. We've populated every continent except Antarctica, and we have temporary
exploration.
Antarctica, right? So we'll explore. We have great diversity among that, and maybe we'll end up with great diversity as we move out into the solar system. I look at not just in the near term, I look at the moon and Mars, and yes, I say near term. I don't think we are definitely less than a decade away, maybe even a half a decade before we start thinking, wow, this is really amazing. I didn't think we would get here this quick.
I'm actually sad we haven't gotten there. I mean, now you're a little older than me, and I remember in the 60s what we thought it would be like now. We thought we'd be on Mars already and stuff, and somehow, somewhere, I think we dropped the ball. That's how I feel sometimes. We got self-absorbed to a point that we shouldn't have.
Right. There's a push and pull effect. We need to reach out, but then we also need periods of time where we regroup and consolidate our base before we move forward. So I don't know. Is that my military training telling me that? You know, you push.
Well, that's something I think.
Forward again. We do that with. We should do that with everything, and I think we're in an expansion area now for space.
I think that's something that the COVID has pushed us to do. We were doing more virtual things like this. I mean, we were doing some of this before COVID, but now this is how we have to do life. And like I said, this is going to make it easier to go to the moon and go to Mars. And people are used to talking to people like this. They're not going to be like, oh, that's the only way I'll have to do it. It'll be like, oh, I did that all the time.
And some people say, you know, I do Zoom meetings or I do Skype or pick your technology, okay? But, you know, I really don't enjoy it that much. I really want the face-to-face experience. And I get that. And we need that too. But that's why I brought up augmented reality earlier with a lead-in into virtual reality. Virtual reality now is cool from watching YouTube videos in virtual reality or playing virtual reality games. But as tactile technology is developed to go with virtual reality, as we're planning to be able to have people away for extended periods of time. In the military, it wasn't uncommon to have assignments that took you away for a year or more, and then you'd come back to your family. And yes, I am a little older than you. So in my early military assignments, that meant pretty much no contact other than, letters and stuff back and forth. And that was the extent of it. And then phone calling became less expensive, and then it was phone calls. And then late in my military career, cell phones really became an issue. My military unit was called up to help with forest fires, much like what's going on here. And we were called to backfill, and we went in and provided communications between fire camps. But that communication wasn't just radio and data, but was also protecting cell phone towers and distributing cell phones. And then a lot of my military people that were supporting this in prior times, I would have set up communication nodes just strictly for them so that they could stay in touch with the family. Well, we were stateside. We were in some pretty rural areas, but in most cases there were cell phone signals, and people didn't need that. They could pull a phone out of their pocket on a 15-minute break and call home. So that all happened in one career. Now, project that forward with the expansion, the exponential expansion of what's going on in technology, and apply that to the moon and Mars, and it gets pretty darn exciting.
Yeah, it does. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that too. And I remember the change in telephones. I remember when you'd get weird phone calls late on a Sunday night because that was the cheapest time. My favorite joke, I don't know if I've told it to you before, was I used to be with Chuck Norris on his Kick Drugs Out of America. And President Bush Sr. was on that with him. Well, one Sunday night, I get this call. This is President Bush, and I'd like to buy you. And I hung up on him. And then I got this mail that said, "Oh, I hope everybody enjoyed their call from President Bush about our upcoming event." And I'm like, I actually hung up on President Bush. Of course, they were trying to get you to go to an event that cost you thousands of dollars, which this is back in the early 90s was actually a couple $1,000 was more like $15,000 today or $10,000 today to go to this event, to have dinner and play, to go to a barbecue in Texas and play tennis with them. But I hung up on them, thinking it was a prank. But I used to get other calls like that too from people that were making business calls, and they do it late after 10 on a Sunday night because that was the cheapest time to call. And it's funny how that's changed so much. I'll tell you what, though, we're almost at 45 minutes. I'll let you go. We can do some more talking another time. Don't want to keep you too long. I know you have things to do. Now, we do have the election coming up next week. Do you have any predictions for the election? What do you think? Any predictions? Can you be like the amazing Kreskin and give me a prediction?
I think I'm fresh out of predictions this year, but I am a fascinated observer. And one of the reasons I'm fresh out of predictions is because predictions that I made during the primaries fell pretty flat. And even projections of how I thought it would play out in the major senatorial races and in states that are important to the Electoral College, I haven't even been close. And I think I've been too conservative. I think I've been too conservative, quite honestly, in my judgment. So I'm watching the polls. I'm sitting here watching what's going on in Arizona, for example. Arizona's been a solidly red state for decades upon decades. And we elected last time around a Democratic senator. And right now you had mentioned about Kelly running. And right now he leads his Republican challenger. So I'm not necessarily advocating for the Democrats. I'm just saying this is the type of thing that makes it hard to look at, because there is, outside the usual percentage of air, a good chance that solid red Arizona will have 2 blue senators. Who would have thought? Certainly not me.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not really sure either how it's going to go. I think it's too close to be able to tell at this point, and I don't know how it's going to be do with a lot of the different elections, not just the presidential. So, but tell you what, maybe that's what we should talk about next time, how things turned out and our thoughts after the fact.
Well, the only insight that I do have into that is Charlie Cam. You mentioned him earlier, and he looked into his time machine the other day and saw who the 46th president of the United States is. And I'm going to leave this as a cliffhanger. John and viewers, if you haven't seen that, go find Charlie Cam's Facebook page, and you can see who the 46th president of the United States will be.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and look forward to being with you again, and hope everything goes good, and stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it as always. Bye now.